Netburst. I've just acquired this Dell Dimension 8200. Shall we take a little look at it? In my opinion, this PC is a good example of early 2000s consumer grade PCs. So we've got two drive bays at the front. The top one is a DVD-ROM, the lower one is a CD rewritable. It does have a floppy drive. Here's the power button, Dimension 8200, and we have one LED for the hard drive just here, and the power button itself does light up. We have a flap. Under here there are two USB ports and one audio jack. Microsoft Windows XP sticker, and obviously good old Pentium 4. The case overall is actually in excellent condition. I suppose a bit of a time warp. This particular PC was used very little overall over the years. It's from about 2002, early 2002. We'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. Very few scratches or marks on it, a little bit at the top here, but not very much. Windows XP Home Edition sticker just there. At the back of this amazing Dell, we have a power supply, serial, parallel, PS2 ports, only two USB ports, and graphics card, DVI-I, and VGA output. We do have a sound card with game port and a modem. Additionally, the good people at Dell have given us a way of locking up this case with a nice padlock. Thank you, Dell. This case opens up while it's on its side, and it is surprisingly heavy. So it's a case of pushing down that button there, and there's one on the top, and lifting it upwards. It does in fact open the other way up. And there we go, clamshell design. And with a bit more detail on the inside, we can see Dell's proprietary CPU cooler. So that there is passive, of course, the CPU heatsink, and we just got a fan on the back of the case here, drawing air over the cooler and out the back of the case just here. Here are our three expansion cards. There's the modem. We've got sound card plugged in with a proprietary connector here which leads to the front of the case, and this of course is the CD audio, and our graphics card is just there. We'll have a little look at that in a moment. The motherboard is non-standard, I believe, from what I can see, non-ATX. We've got this additional piece down here allowing two extra PCI slots to be fitted with this connector piece, so the main motherboard stops just here. And you may well have already noticed the biggest surprise about this particular Dell, the RAM. It's an RD-RAM system, so we've got two slots here populated, and of course we've got two terminator slots in these two far sockets over the end here. These of course are needed if you don't populate the final two rows with RAM. Let's take a stick out and have a look at it. So it's a Samsung 800 MHz stick at 45 nanoseconds timing, and it is just 128 megabytes. So yes, this system running Windows XP Home has got 256 megabytes total of RAM. Even though it's fast, this is RD RAM, that is not very much RAM for XP. Can you guess if this system will be slow or fast? Let's have a look at one of these Terminator sticks. Not too much to see, mostly blank. Dell branded this one. For removable storage, here's the back of our two CD and DVD-ROM drives. Hard drive is here. There's nothing else populated in the lower slot. It's just that one hard drive. Floppy drive is of course just below here, just up inside there. Dell have given us some extra removable drive rails here, so we can add some more if we want to, and there are also some more down there you might be able to see. That's the front I/O just in there. That's got just USB and audio on it. It is in fact USB 1.1 unfortunately on this motherboard. No SATA connections on this motherboard. This is the front I/O for the front panel there, providing the USB. IDE channel 1 is just behind it there. Channel 2 is here, and floppy just there. Let's take a look at these cards. Toolless design, which is nice. Graphics card first, obviously. We have an NVIDIA GeForce 3 Ti 200. So as I gather, this is one of the low models of its type. That said, as I understand it, GeForce 3s are relatively well regarded, and I'm going to have a look at fiddling about with this one, as you can overclock them to GeForce 3 Ti 500 speeds, and maybe even flash the BIOS. We'll have a look at that. Phil's Computer Lab has done a video on flashing one of these to a Ti 500 BIOS, so I might give that a go. Look at these capacitors. That's not very good, is it? I can tell you that the card does work, the system does run fine, but in terms of overclocking, I'm likely to want to replace these before I do anything like that and solve the cooling problem. This is just passively cooled at the moment. So I will be replacing these capacitors. I have actually already bought some spares for it. Sound card. We have a Sound Blaster Live. It's the CT4780. I imagine that's a proprietary Dell branded one, or Dell authorized one for OEM builds like this. And the bit you've all been waiting for, a 56K modem. Who doesn't want one of these in their system? Made by Creative. Unlike every other retro PC video you see where people chuck these out, I'm keeping it for nostalgia reasons. You can't tell me you don't love the sound of a 56K modem connecting to the internet. Power supply has a total rated wattage of 250. Relatively strong 5-volt rail, 22 amps, not terrible. That said, of course this is Pentium 4, so it's running on the 12 volts, but from an era when power supplies still had fairly strong 5-volt rails, even if the total wattage wasn't very high at all. The 12 volt rail, of course, is not particularly high, and this at 14 amps. Still going strong, apparently, this power supply. Not many miles on the clock. Time to put it back together and boot it up. Let's take a look at the BIOS. So we have a Pentium 4 1.9 gigahertz. This is a Willamette core. Boo! Yeah, we'll get onto that in a little bit. So not a huge amount to be doing in this BIOS, of course, because it's a Dell system, not an aftermarket brand. We can't really do very much with this. Frontside bus is running at 100 megahertz, 256 kilobytes of cache on this Willamette core. No overclocking options, of course, and nothing more really than what you can see on screen here. No other BIOS options. Pretty limited. So let's boot into Windows. Relatively speedy boot up time. Now I've freshly installed Windows Home on here from the previous version that was on, the previous owner's version I should say. So it's a recent install, and I've just installed a couple of things to have a quick look at the system here. Wanted to have a quick look at the hard drive, and it is relatively slow. I think it caps out at 33 megabytes a second transfer speed. So we'll just have a quick go at ATTO, see what that comes out as. There we go, quite inconsistent before 32 kilobytes, but after that, quite consistent. Just shy of 40 megabytes a second maximum transfer. Limited of course by the motherboard or the chipset on the motherboard, plus the drive itself isn't going to be very fast. I believe it's a 5200 RPM drive, of course just IDE. A little bit more detail on that CPU. So non-hyper-threaded of course, using up just 77 megabytes right now, but I have used a few things on this so far since I've been using it, and I did previously have Firefox installed, and I did have it connected to the internet, yes I did, and wow, that really used up lots of RAM, and we were very quickly into the page file, and it completely jogged down in no time at all. So RAM is a serious problem for this machine. Not right now, but it can be if you use just more than a few things. CPU Z, let's have a look at the CPU. There we are, Willamette Core 180 nanometer process. It's got the Intel i850 chipset. You can see the memory's running at 400 megahertz, so 800 effective. Both slots, and that's what it shows up as for slot 3 on floor, which is nothing because of the Terminator modules. GeForce 3 Ti 200, and let's benchmark the processor. So 88 on the single thread, and of course SODO on the multi because it's not multi-threaded. Let's run some benchmarks. And we have our score, 7,123. A few details of the FPS for each game there, and the CPU scores. And let's run 2001. So our score in 3D Mark 2001 is 6,465, and a few details on that. There's the game FPS and some of the processor details. And let's play an amazing game. Just quickly, get an idea of the performance. Okay, that'll do. This game's far too much fun. Right, so the game runs very smoothly, which is nice to see. Now, what we're going to do with our PC? Well, I really want to upgrade it. Just imagine it's, I was going to say a couple of years after you bought it, so let's say maybe 2003, probably only 6 months after you bought it, to be honest, with these specs. You might be thinking, how can I get more power out of this system? How can I make it more usable with rapidly evolving graphics cards and games that demand more power? So I'm going to upgrade it and see what could be done if you had a little bit more money to spend, maybe a couple of years afterwards. So we're certainly going to upgrade the processor. I've already ordered one, it's on the way. The motherboard's got a front side bus maximum of 533 megahertz, and we are going to upgrade the RAM, which is the really biggest limitation with this system, having only 256 megabytes. Now, of course, it is RD RAM, so I'll have to buy quite specific RAM, and hopefully it will work okay. I gather that RD RAM systems are a little picky sometimes. So I've already ordered some, and we'll fit that as soon as it arrives, and I'll be making a video about that. And I'm going to be running all the benchmarks and CPU-Z and everything else like that again, just to see how much of an upgrade I've done and how much you might have been able to expect back in the day if you'd have done this to your system. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back again with another video when the parts arrive, and we'll try to upgrade this beast.